championship has been formed up for many different races. It's seen one dominant driver, Richard Regan Jr., control much of the tempo in this championship. But tonight, that test to try and be a three-time champion is going to be right to its limits, because we're not just at Daytona International Speedway, we're at the road course in the Cup cars, as these competitors get all set to go to be tested to their full balance of limits here for the final round of 2020 Season 3 of the Precision Racing League Cup Series season, presented by Neonism. Welcome to the Global Sim Racing Channel's coverage of tonight's action. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside of the booth tonight is the driver of the JTG Dotary Racing number 37 Chevrolet Camaro and the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, Christian Challoner. Behind the scenes, art director Sean Ambrose, and he is using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. This is such a tricky track, to say the very least. A lot to discuss today. Well, let's take a look at your GSRC lap guide for the best way around this circuit.
Welcome to the Daytona International Speedway. While many oval fans associate this Central Florida track with mainly NASCAR, the road course has gained just as much worldwide fame thanks to it hosting motorcycles and sports cars for decades. In fact, the flagship road race, the 24 Hours of Daytona, has become a major draw for drivers of all disciplines, many eager to have a go at endurance racing. The stats make this place sound relatively simple, with 12 turns spread among 3.5 miles. Indeed, a majority of the lap is spent on the oval portion, where you fly along the notoriously steep banking. But it's easy to underestimate the challenge presented to the drivers. The infield portion begins with the scary kinked entry of Turn 1. Not only is it the fastest part of the track, but the transition from the banking to the flat tends to upset the car as you slow it down. There's also the bus stop chicane on the backstretch. Added in the 80s, this is a tricky piece of circuit that punishes a poor exit severely, with it leading back into the latter half of the oval. As you'd expect, the long periods on throttle mean that drafting tends to play a factor in the racing. It also means passing isn't usually too great of an issue if you have the pace to catch someone. The more difficult thing is managing to gap your opponent so that they don't ride in your slipstream once you get by. With half a century of endurance racing collected among these walls, it's not unfair to say that road racers have just as much claim to call Daytona home. Fans who come to watch certainly won't be disappointed by the high speeds and fantastic thrills it invariably provides each year.
Around the Daytona International Speedway road course. Now let's bring in my partner Christian Challoner, who just raced here this Tuesday. Not an easy track, let's put it that way, because in addition to what you see with the lap guide, you have the Turn 4 chicane. And remember, these are Cup cars. They're not sports cars. These are heavy stock cars trying to wheel their way around a 14-corner track.
Yes, exactly. This is quite a different challenge to say getting around this track in a regular GT car, and obviously we've got that new chicane right at the exit of Turn 4. It's very, very difficult to actually get slowed down for that, because it's so close to the edge of the banking that getting the car stopped, and those turtle curves are very, very extreme. You can't touch them at all. It's going to be a real challenge for drivers tonight, and especially you got to look out for wheel hop in the infield as well. It'll be very, very difficult to avoid, and I expect we'll see a couple of guys going off into the barriers at the horseshoes.
There are also several incidents already in practice in that final chicane, and several at the West Horseshoe out of Turn 6 and the bus stop. A lot to discuss tonight, but this evening's race sponsor is Neonism. If you're looking for an awesome high-res detail paint for your iRacing services and races, message them on Facebook and tell them that the Precision Racing League sent you. This series is also sponsored by Webb Hearing Centers. Family owned and operated since 1972. Top quality hearing aids and services available there in Arizona. Visit them at webbhearingcenters.com. The series is also sponsored by Road Trip Transport. Whether a tractor or truck or anything in between, you can move it. Specializing in all kinds of flatbed freight, call Road Trip Transport at 251-525-7429. This series is also sponsored by Butt Kicker. Butt Kicker products include incredible immersion and bring realism to every game. Feel every nuance and truly put yourself in the driver's seat. To feel what you've been missing, go to thebuttkicker.com. For those who have missed the previous 9 rounds, you're in for what could be a challenging race because while there's a gigantic buffer in the point standings for one Richard Regan Jr. with 6 victories on the campaign, with the drops factored in, 23 points the gap, with James O'Brien, Bradley Holly, and Joshua Daniels mathematically within range, there have been storylines to talk about involving Richard Regan Jr., which may hamper him in this race. Essentially, he finishes inside the top 23. He is a 3-time champion, back-to-back-to-back. You also have Abner Acosta looking to finish higher than 5th in the standings, 43 points back, entering this final round. The team championship for those who missed last round was also clinched. 139 points is the gap between AthleteBooker.com Esports and Whataback Jelly Rolls Racing. A couple positions are still up for grabs. Carl Ramrod trying to hold on to 3rd with SGE Esports in P4, and the Adams Family Racing team is currently rounding out said top 5. Just outside the range of them, keep in mind, is Riding Shotgun Rangers. Let's take a look at your race details, and remember, this was originally scheduled for Watkins Glen, but when NASCAR changed the schedule and moved the date to this racetrack, the Precision Racing League followed suit, Christian.
Yeah, there was a big rush for all series really to come to this racetrack, and obviously round 10 of 10, so it's our finale for the series, and it's going to be 25 laps around here tonight, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but you've got to remember that the lap length is about between 1 minute 52s for the very, very fastest hot lap qualifying times, all the way out to say a 157 to 158. So that's going to be a significant drop off in the race. The tire fall off is very, very extreme, especially in the first 5 to 6 laps. I expect that we'll see this will be a pretty easy one-stop race for everybody. Obviously, we're using the fixed setup tonight. There'll be no caution, so it'll be a pure strategy race. I think we'll see everybody come in between laps 10 and 15, kind of maybe plus-minus 2 on that halfway point. And a 24 incident limit, it's possible that we could see some drivers get close to that. It's very easy to pick up a 1x through the bus stop.
It'll be intriguing to see who can hold on throughout this track. Try and have the best times available. To ask you, are you interested in advertising with GSRC? Our channel's 1 million monthly global impressions are a great way to get your branding seen by a diverse audience. Follow the link in the description in the YouTube version of this broadcast tonight to learn more about the Global Sim Racing channel. Couple more things to know. First, the weather, very hot, to put it that way. Partly cloudy skies, 130 degrees is the track temp. 80 degrees Fahrenheit is the air temp. Wind not a factor, humidity around 51%. It's a balmy one, to say the very least, in terms of the track temperature. So to add that extra little bit of wrinkle to it, it's also very slick out there, Christian.
Yeah, 130 degree track temperature is very, very hot indeed, and they're really going to be sliding around like nobody's business after about 5 or 6 laps, because the tire fall off is very, very extreme in those first couple of laps. And this is actually something that we're going to have to watch out for when we do see drivers come down to pit road, because the difference between the first and the second laps on a new set of tires is over or close to a second. So if we see some drivers attempt the undercut, they're going to have quite a substantial gap to the car that they actually undercut, because if they come out right in front of them, then really the game is over already. The car with the 1 lap fresher tires has about 5 to 6 laps where it has a significant advantage to make that repass happen. So the goal really is to have, say, a 4 to 5 second buffer to the car that you've undercut, and hope that you can hang on to get to that point where the tires are all kind of normalized after about six laps or so, and then you've probably got that position.
Interested to see how the strategy plays out here, and what isn't looking to be an intriguing race. By the way, live timing and scoring is available for tonight's event. Be sure to keep up with your favorite teams and drivers at GSRC.tv to keep up with where they are on the racetrack, what their times are, how the follow-up's playing off, and what their strategy is throughout this evening's event. Should be no surprise that Abner Acosta is on top of the board, a road course specialist from Level Motorsports, team known for running various different road course events. Bradley Holly, Richard Regan Jr., Danny Cervantes, James O'Brien round out the top 5. All those drivers were in the 153, separated by 0.7 of a second. But as we get ready for qualifying, one thing to note, Christian, it's a longer session tonight, 10 minutes to set 2 laps, as it takes a lot of time to get your tires up to speed and the car around the track to get those 2 laps in.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a technique that we'll see a lot of drivers do, which is they'll go very very slowly on their outlap to really maximize the tire performance when they get to start their actual lap, because the tire heat is really what causes the drop off, and obviously with the drop off being so extreme in the first couple of laps, you really want to keep the tires on the car as much as possible. You don't want to burn them off on the outlap. So the 10-minute session for 2 laps is going to allow a little bit of tactics in that regard, but still it adds a lot of pressure, because if you crawl around the entire outlap, it's about 3 minutes, and that's a long time to think about how you're going to approach turn one. And I don't think it's unfair to say that we're going to see a couple of drivers who are going to creep the entire lap, and then they'll go down to turn one and they're going to probably completely miss the corner. It's just one of those things that always happens. There's always somebody who makes that mistake.
I mean, we've seen several drivers in several series do it in real life this weekend. Not going to be surprised if we see 1 or 2 or 10 do the same thing today, as Adam Zemke is the first car running out of the pit lane for the start of this qualifying session. He's not doing the crawl method. He's now trying to get up to speed, in fact, on the exit of turn 6 at the moment. And Zemke having a solid season overall in his blue and white machine, looking to finish it off strong.
Yeah, and this is definitely not gonna give him an opportunity to go for the pole by not going slow through the infield, and definitely not go slow on the banking here. But it will give him a large amount of time to actually get the laps completed. And that's the other thing, that if you make a mistake on that first timed lap, it then puts you in a bit of a tight box to get another creep all the way around the lap, and then actually you've only got that one shot at getting that second thing. And if you make a mistake on that one, then, well, you're going to be starting at the back.
Vast majority of the field, by the way, has already started either their crawl or their speed pickup out of the pit lane. The only drivers not to come out of the pit lane yet are Adam Young, Chad Brown, Paul Johnson, Jeffrey Smith, Christopher Williams, Doyle Lawrence, who's back in the 2-car now tonight, James O'Brien and Richard Regan Jr., who are waiting for the next few moments or so before they come out of the pit lane. Let's talk us through a lap here, Christian, as you just again raced here on Tuesday. It was tricky, it looked like, throughout the race.
Yeah, so going into turn 1 in a stock car is not like it is in a GT car. In a GT car, there's a lot of different lines to there. In the stock car, you really want to keep it tight to the inside. So you have to be assertive with the brakes, but not too aggressive, because if you slide wide, the track cambers away and you'll just basically slide off the edge of the world. So you really want to get it maximized, but got to keep it tucked to the inside, get straight to come off there. Similar deal through the first horseshoe, actually. And then this kink is really tricky, because it's not flat out, but it's very, very high speed, and you've got to watch that inside curve, because if you clip it, then it's going to knock you offline for that second horseshoe. Second horseshoe, very similar to the first. Again, you just got to kind of hook it around the inside, maximize the exit by running out to the curb. The corner coming out to the bank can be very, very tricky. It's not so much the first phase, it's the second bit where you're coming up onto the bank. If you get a little bit of a slide there, it kills all the speed that you're carrying onto the bank, and obviously that hits you all the way down to the bus stop. The bus stop is actually one of the easier corners in terms of braking for this track, because you get so much downforce at this point. But if you're slightly too late and you get the entry wrong, if you're wide on this first left-hand part, it puts you wide all the way through the exit. So we see here he's pretty heavy on the curbs. That's exactly what you want to do. You've got to watch for the 1X. Don't clip the grass on the left side there, because it'll do that to you. It'll throw you up to the wall, and that's going to cost him some speed as he comes around 2 and 4. Now, coming off of 4 is very, very tricky. You'll see two patches. So he goes past the first one, starts maybe not the second one. He's in line with that. And then he'll come up to around the caution light, the 4-5 marker, and he'll get heavy on the brakes. You cannot touch these yellow curbs. If you touch these yellow curbs, the entire lap is gone. Clips it a little bit. It didn't really hurt him too much, but if you clip one, especially when that first left side one when you're on the brakes, it will throw the entire chicane away. And it's such a high pressure chicane to actually get right, because it's at the end of what's been a very challenging lap in the first place. You see there, Bissell Jr.'s clipped it a little bit. Probably going to cost him maybe a tenth or two there, but he got the exit squared up.
And remember, if you hit the curbs too hard as well, you can get engine damage. They actually lifted the height of the curbs since the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series event, and we've seen several drivers nearly flip over in some of the races. In NIS Open on Friday on the iRacing Esports Network, several drivers crushed in their front nose and their back bumper. They hit the curbing so hard.
Yeah, that's another thing. Obviously, you can damage the car quite significantly, even just on the curb itself. I know myself when I gave this new chicane a little bit of a go after the eNASCAR race. The first thing I did was I clipped the right hand yellow curb, and it threw me so wide that then I launched over the left hand curb, and it just threw me straight into the outside wall. So you got to watch out for that. That can definitely happen to you. But as you said, even if you don't have some hard contact with the wall, just going over the curbs themselves can significantly damage the car. And around here, a loss of straight line speed is gonna hurt a lot. There's so much time when you're at full throttle, especially that run from the exit of the infield all the way down to the bus stop. It's a very, very long period of time at full throttle, and you will lose at least 2 to 3 tenths if you have damage through that section alone.
Approaching 4 minutes to go in the session. Should be no surprise that Abner Acosta, who is an independent in this series, is up the top of the board by 7 tenths of a second nearly over Joshua Daniels, David Wilson, Josh Slade, Scotty Johnson. Take a look at Brett Adams trying to set a time in the 23 machine. Some of his brothers, Blaine Adams in P7. Brett Adams across the stripe this time. Bumps himself up to P6, a 156.5, a decent lap for him on his first run. But here's the difficult part. The track's actually gotten hotter during this qualifying session, so surprise, if you waited for the track to cool down, it kind of went the opposite direction for you.
Yeah, and obviously that's going to make it even more tricky at this point. You see Mark Kalin had quite a ride over the chicane there. I'm a little bit surprised that Acosta is as high as he is in the 53-second bracket right there. I really thought that he might be one of our chances to get down into those 52-second lap times.
Absolutely, a Scotty Johnson. That time crossing the stripe, not putting up a time, it appears. It was a P5, in fact. That was a second lap around. James O'Brien, one of the championship contenders. Remember, he is very solid at the road courses. He was very good at the beginning of the season when we started off at Sonoma. And this time, he bumps himself to second, still 3 tenths of a second off the pole, however. The thing is, though, as we see Blaine Adams come around the second lap, the respective teammate and the championship leader, he's had a dramatic night so far, let's put it that way, in the 46 machine. Spoke with him just before today's race, where he mentioned that his whole pedal exploded. Specifically, the damper in his throttle exploded, and spent the past half an hour prior to qualifying trying to fix and replace that said damper. Ended up having hydraulic fluid all over the place. A fun night. Way to start the night, he said. You did put a spare in just in time for the end of practice in the beginning of qualifying, though, in the 46.
Yeah, that's definitely a rough way to start your night, but that's obviously a good advertisement for having a spare of everything. If you can manage to do it, it's always a good idea, because if you don't, yeah, there we go, 52-second lap time. I thought it was possible. Holly's the first driver to do it at the 52.925.
I was gonna say there, Christian, pardon me for cutting you off there. He was the second quickest in practice, and until the end of the session when Acosta joined in, he was having a decent margin to everybody else. Now, he's bumped off the road course ace from the pole as Medina tries to set a time. He's crashed a couple times already in this qualifying session. He's now in 19th. Paul Johnson currently trying to set a time. He's had some solid runs in the second half of the season. The number 14 machine is looking to try and have a good run. His fellow friend just mentioned on the YouTube version of the broadcast that said friend is letting Johnson use his sim rig. Hoping it stays safe today. Congratulations, friend. He just put your rig into P6.
And that's a good job right there, especially on an unfamiliar rig as well.
Couple drivers yet to set a time. Regan Jr. yet to put up a time. Other cars like Blaine Adams are trying to put in practice laps. Williams yet to put in a time as well. Everybody else either starting from the back, it appears, or have crashed several times in qualifying. Keep in mind, Adams has already set his 2 laps, so he's using this time for practice. The curiosity, though, has to go to the 46. Needs to finish about 23rd or better tonight to secure a three-peat for the championship. Will he be able to put in a good time this time by Regan Jr. using the apron for speed? And no. Yes, up to 5th, in fact. A 154.171 is the calculation.
Yeah, solid lap time out there for Regan Jr. Obviously left it very, very late in the session, had just about 20 seconds to go, so he was only ever going to get that one attempt.
Rest of the drivers taking the time to try and set some more time. Unfortunately, they're out of set time. As the qualifying session rounds up for the final time in 2020 Season 3, it's time to buckle up and hope you can keep your car secure. It's time for the championship decider at the Daytona International Speedway Road Course. Starting up in the pole tonight, Bradley Hawley with a 152.925. He sat on the racetrack, in fact, letting the car run just at the edge of the exit of turn 6 before launching off to his time to run away by half a second over Abner Acosta. James O'Brien, Joshua Daniels are in row 2. Row 3, Richard Regan Jr. and David Wilson Jr. Row 4 features Paul Johnson and Josh Slade, with Danny Cervantes and Mike Knight from GenX rounding out your top 10.
And first driving in the next second bracket, the 56s, Scotty Johnson lines up in 11th. Alongside him, Brett Adams, 3 tenths behind in 12th. Adam Zemke, one of the first drivers we saw out there in qualifying, he's in 13th, with Blaine Adams alongside him in 14th. Then we've got Brandon Adams in 15th, with Robert Bissell Jr. in 16th. We saw him hammering those curbs at that last chicane right there. And we've got Stephen P. Durbin in 17th, Pat Harvey actually pretty far back here in 18th, James Duke 19th, and Derek Schilling in 20th.
Deep in the field, the last time put up was Jose Medina. Total director Sean Ambrose, he's feeling funky tonight. 159.828 is his time on the racetrack. Charles Sumner starts via provisionals on 22nd spot. Colton Lane and Ab Young starting 23rd, 24th. Mark Kalin deep in the field tonight in about 25th spot. Jeffrey Smith will bump up to P26 via ordering. Doyle Rance back on the racetrack for the first time in a few weeks with a brand new number for his machine. Christopher Williams, Chad Brown rounds out your field tonight. Again, 25 laps the distance here at the Daytona International Speedway Road Course. That's approximately 89 miles on the docket tonight. 14 turns officially with the chicane around this racetrack. Buckle up. This is going to be a wild one, Christian.
Drive is still too wide all the way through the infield, I think. They're only really going to start spreading out when it gets to the backstretch. So the key is get through that first lap. Don't lose a lot of positions. It's very hard to get them back on a road course. We say how critical qualifying is, but it's never more critical than on a road course, just because you get that field spread that pulls everybody apart. And even drivers that you might have the same pace as, if they're 5-6 seconds up the road, it's a long time to get that back. It's not like it is on an oval where you can cut through the pack easily. And I think the biggest thing is just don't get turned around that first lap. Get through it, don't get damaged, and then really you just got to look at running your own race strategy. Don't really focus on what's going on around you. If you can get by people, if they make mistakes, take advantage of it, because it's going to be very, very hard to pass otherwise.
Any interesting storyline out of all this too, Christian? 4 drivers who are all within championship contention mathematically are starting inside the top 5. So this could be crucial on how every one of those drivers take this start coming out of this final chicane. Safety car moving its way through the final chicane. Bradley Hawley in control of the field. For one final time, the drivers are all set for the green flag. From the Daytona Road Course, the Precision Racing League Cup Series is underway from the World Center of Racing.
We had an incident right there on the start. It looked like Regan Jr. actually tipped David Wilson around before they even got out of last chicane.
Not the best way to start things off, as Wilson Jr. was actually a bit further back. It was Paul Johnson who made the contact and spun around. That may be a potential black flag for a couple drivers with where that spin was. Johnson is still going, meanwhile, by the way, at around 9th position. Wilson all the way back in 28th as they make their way to the International Horseshoe and the West Horseshoe for the first time.
It's absolutely not the start of the race that those drivers wanted right there. And that's exactly what you had to be careful of. Is it wasn't where I was expecting to see people get turned around, but now all the way at the tail end of the field, that's a long road back from there.
Look at the bright side. No cars went to the tire barrier this time through the infield section to start off. Deep dive though. Acosta playing defense. Regan Jr. trying to take away P3 already. He's already passed his teammate Joshua Daniels as they make their way through NASCAR Turn 1 for the first time.
Yeah, and this is where Acosta is a little bit vulnerable here, stuck on that top side. Regan Jr. is going to have the line into the bus stop here. It should be a relatively easy pass for him.
Yes, indeed. Preferred line into the bus stop. Acosta gives it to him. Regan Jr. already up to the back bumper of his teammate, in fact. Coming down the exit of the bus stop, heading towards NASCAR 3 and 4. Bradley Holly, though, is already checked out by nearly 2 seconds at the front of the field.
And Holly's now really got command of this race by having such a big gap early on. There's going to be no draft effect to pull anybody up to him. It's just going to be him on his own until he reaches lap traffic, which I think they will do tonight. Obviously, it's a pretty big field spread. He hammered that last curve in the chicane there. Very lucky not to end up thrown up to the wall.
Or get engine damage as he leads the first lap of the race. 24 laps to go now. And there were several drivers in your race too on Tuesday, Christian, with the lower curves, mind you, who had to suffer from engine damage much of the way. Casey Kerwin had to hold on for the rest of the race after he hit the curbs on lap 15. Chris Overland, his race finished off after he hit the curbing as well.
Yeah, I know a couple of drivers were a little bit unhappy with the damage that they picked up going over those curbs. I know I spoke to Phil Diaz after the race as well, and he also picked up some damage, and it just made that night really kind of brutally long at that point because you're just playing defense and trying to hold on. You've obviously lost a lot of pace in the car, and there's nothing you can do to get it back.
Looking right now is on board Acosta. Trying to already fight for his position back. Quickest driver in practice, though with minimal laps at that total. Looking to fight. There has also been trouble, by the way, to the back of the field. David Wilson Jr. has had to tow his car. Jose Medina has also spun around from 23rd position. They are still rolling along as we follow along with Acosta trying to keep up with the draft in NASCAR 2.
Yeah, I was just actually saw that out the corner of my eye there. It looked like Medina had a little bit of an overcorrection on the exit of the horseshoe. Just tipped Wilson around.
So that may be night done for Wilson Jr. as James O'Brien still holding on to the spot. And they're already closing back up to Holly. They've reeled back in half a second this lap, this entire pack.
And I think this is really a function of all these drivers kind of trying to push each other along right here. See Regan Jr. doing a great job, all things considered. Hasn't had as much practice as the rest of these guys tonight with that damper issue, but coming into the last chicane, everybody really tight for that second spot.
Well, Regan Jr. try and push the issue. They're also teammates, remember, on Bobby Dale Earnhardt Legacy Esports. Yes, indeed. O'Brien gives him the space. Regan Jr. makes the pass. Just a tenth or so off the pace of Bradley Holly for the quickest lap so far, a 1:54.5. And already the gap is about 1.8 seconds again just from that exchange.
Yeah, and we saw that Regan was looking really, really strong even at Sonoma. And it was actually a race where I thought that it might be an opportunity for somebody like Abner Acosta to steal a win away, but it just didn't happen. Regan Jr. was just so strong. And it looks like this is going to be repeated again tonight. We'll have to see if he can get up to Holly and challenge him for the win.
Now, I'm really curious here. He really put a lot of effort tonight, Christian, on long run practice tonight. Particularly aimed for 13 to 15 lap runs this evening. Meanwhile, there is a second pack starting to form up. Paul Johnson from that group had a bit of a problem. He's now trying to get around some cars. Let's take a look.
First horseshoe, everybody's struggling a little bit for traction coming up to the kink now. Everything looks okay at this point. A little bit wide on there. It looked like he was on the grass actually, trying to turn into the kink, and obviously then it was kind of downhill and rough from there, trying to get the car stopped for the second horseshoe. Everybody behind trying to take advantage. Zemke trying to get by on the inside.
That puts him all the way in P11 on the racetrack. Those cones, they'll live to see another lap meanwhile. Speaking of drivers looking to gain positions, still O'Brien and Acosta. Dicing a little bit, O'Brien already back to third, but Acosta now picking up a bit of pace again. Was a couple tenths of a second quicker last time by than the number 9 machine.
O'Brien really drove deep into the chicane. Acosta's got a big run on him looking to his inside now coming through the tri-oval. Looks like O'Brien's just going to kind of let this position go if Acosta can get the braking right for turn 1.
Yes, indeed, gives him the space. So Acosta now already up to P3. One more drivers within this grouping from 2nd to 5th. Joshua Daniels also reeling them in. The championship contenders doing exactly what they need to do. They might need some luck outside of that. Behind this, by the way, for Acosta, dive to the inside of the International Horseshoe. Daniels having the grip on the inside. O'Brien heading towards the dog leg, lets his teammate on by. Daniels now up to P4, and just like that, O'Brien's the back of the lead group.
Yeah, I'm not sure what O'Brien's trying to do here, whether he's just trying to save some tire, because this looks uncharacteristically kind of, I don't want to say slow, but obviously he's not trying to run at the same pace as the rest of the drivers in this group, and he's letting them by pretty easily, to be honest. I mean, I think that move that happened there into the first horseshoe, that really only came off because their teammates. The door would firmly have been closed because that was from a long way back if those drivers weren't teammates.
100% on that one. There's been a change for position for 6, by the way. Cervantes was able to get a good run off the exit of turn 6. Slade pushed up the track. Now the 25 machine looking to run away. This is 9 seconds back in the race lead.
And unfortunately, these drivers are already kind of in that no man's land group because they're pretty far off the back of the top 5 right now. But having their own battle for best of the rest, so to speak.
Give credit though to Cervantes on his solid season. Top 6 in the point standings entering the final race of the campaign. Has scored several top 5s and top 10s. Looking to get one last top 10 to finish off the campaign before things get really interesting. Remember, with the playoff format for the Season 4 campaign that we talked about back in the wintertime.
Yeah, Cervantes is one of those drivers who's actually always kind of shown a lot of potential. Had some moments where he's been in contention to take race wins, and unfortunately just seems to get a bit unlucky at times, and maybe he's a little bit a bit too aggressive in battle at other times. But obviously, like tonight, this is a difficult track to get around, and obviously showing a good performance here to be in P6.
He's +3 as well from his starting position, by the way, in that 25 car. Should known in the grouping behind them, Mike Knight hit the curbs coming towards the start and finish line. Ended up smashing his left front, lost 2 positions as a result. They're also dicing that said group as we still follow on board with Danny Cervantes as he goes through the infield still. Here's that grouping we're talking about right there. Adams actually just swapped spots with Johnson in the International Horseshoe. Knight's already keeping up with the back end of this grouping as well. This is also where Paul Johnson is also in line. Take a look at that exact pass that we're describing here this is again the International Horseshoe.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest passing spots that we saw in the eNASCAR race as well. You see there, Brett Adams just to the inside there. Johnson pretty wide right there. Gave the advantage pretty easily there to Adams to have that preferred line as they got to the king.
But Adams a +4, and he's improved a lot, have to say. All the Adams family racing drivers have. They're a group of brothers with only a few months of sim racing experience before the start of this season. They've been able to slowly but surely improve their performances from sub-top 20 to being able to crack into the top 10, 1 or 2 of them.
Yeah, they've kind of slowly been moving their way through that mid-pack group, and obviously, as you say, they've got better and better as the season's gone on, and right now, obviously, Brett Adams having a great run here inside the top 10.
Yep. Scotty Johnson also trying to keep within touch with him, you see, heading into the chicane, and Adams hits the curb. Bad run once again, and here we go again. Scotty Johnson, good run to the bottom side, had to check up hard, though, not to run over the Ford Mustang. Has the preferred line once again back into turn 1. Brett Adams backing off a little bit as Knight just about turns him and does. Knight slides up with him. Paul Johnson takes advantage and gains 2 spots.
Yeah, it's a very optimistic move right there by Knight to try and take advantage of the fact that Adams was going to be offline.
Right now, this is still live action, by the way, as they're still scrapping. Adams trying to pass Knight right back. Nearly blew the corner. Here's Bisson Jr. and Zemke along with Blaine Adams now to join the party just behind them as well.
And this is what happens when you have a battle on a road course. It just pulls everybody in behind you. And obviously now you've got Zemke, Adams again looking back to the inside. And imagine he's not going to be too happy with Knight right now. Knight goes a little bit wide in the corner. Adams with the advantage. But is he going to get this run done? Looks like Knight's going to give him that position back.
Yes, indeed he does. Back single file behind that scoring pylon. Look how much everyone else, though, has gained on behind. You see from the drone cam, that's Bisson Jr. You have Zemke in the line. Then behind them, you see in the back rear of your mirror, that is Brett. That is also Blaine Adams, Pat Harvey, Mark Kalin, who have also joined in on this train.
Yeah, this is now a group all the way back from the back end of the top 10 down to about 16th or 17th place. So now a lot of cars in with a chance of actually getting into the top 10.
Especially with the keep on swapping positions like we just seen. And contact behind him. Pat Harvey just got turned in the bus stop. Mark Halen gets through clean, but it's Blaine Adams who hooks the SGE Esports machine around to the bus stop.
And we see here it's coming down into the bus stop. Harvey's looking like he's got a pretty normal line here. Goes through the first part, checks up a little bit. Just behind him, just had so much more momentum somehow. Harvey a little bit slow through that center section. Luckily, he doesn't get any damage from that, just gets turned around. So you got a driver missing the chicane there at the end of the lap.
Yes, indeed. Remember, they added an additional 2 seconds to the slowdown penalty in the final chicane in the most recent iRacing patch on Thursday, after some drivers were able to notice said abilities with that said corner, to say the very least, prior to that. P10, meanwhile, Brad Adams now in front once again in this grouping. Still holding on in front of Mike Knight. That's about to change potentially as Knight's in the grass. What a save by Knight as Bisson Jr. just avoids him heading into the dog leg.
Yeah, Knight saw that opportunity there. He saw Adams get a little bit of a wiggle on when he got on the throttle, but unfortunately for Knight, he got too enthusiastic with his own throttle pedal. Had the same thing happen to him. Looked like he kind of just tried to keep his foot in it and hope that he would kind of get out of the snake, so to speak, and ended up off in the grass by the time that happened.
Here we got bitten by a rattlesnake, let's put it that way. As Knight trying to not be even more rattled, he's now lost touch just about with Bisson Jr. and Adam Zemke. Now looking to try and get this pass. Still a few car lengths behind, though, before he can try to realistically make the move. The bright side, though, he's got the better run out of NASCAR 2.
Yeah, and this is interestingly, in GT cars, we normally see the bus stop as a real big passing place, but with these cars, it just doesn't seem to be the case. A lot of the passing that we see is through the infield, or if there is a pass in the bus stop, it comes within a mistake, like we've got right here. Bisson Jr. down to the inside. He's going to have that line as they get through to that new chicane coming off of turn 4. Adams just gives the position up, realizes there's no way he's going to be able to fight it on the top of the racetrack.
Yes, indeed. Here comes Adams right behind. This is from the back view of Bisson Jr. And Bisson Jr. nearly cooked the first part of the curve. Was able to get a faster run, though, as Adams had a bobble in the second portion of that final chicane. 18 to go this time by. And by the way, the leaders are now reaching traffic. Jose Medina, who has been having an adventure today, riding the curbs like a skateboard, losing his front nose, crashing into tire barriers, is now being passed by some of your race leaders. Medina's actually in the sand and the grass right now on the International Horseshoe, letting by about 4 farm back. Keep in mind, Regan Jr. lost about 2 to 3 seconds trying to pass the 24.
Yeah, and I've actually been keeping an eye on Acosta, and it looks like Acosta's been kind of getting just ever so closer to the back of Regan Jr. as this run's gone on. Actually, not so much what I was expecting, because back at Sonoma we saw the opposite kind of happen. It looked like Regan Jr. had the better long run pace, and Acosta was really strong in those initial laps. But now they're at that point where the tires are going to pretty much have equalized, and they're going to have the same thing now through to the end of the run. So whatever you have at this point is whatever you've got until you make that pit stop. And right now it looks like Acosta has actually got the advantage towards him.
Now Acosta looking fairly strong on this longer run, but these cars are 5 seconds behind Bradley Hall. He's just taken off like a rocket ship. Heck of a run so far, you have to say, for these two drivers inside the top 3. They've been able to break away from Joshua Daniels and James O'Brien to make it a fight amongst themselves. Regan Jr. doing what he needs, though, for the championship, Christian.
Yeah, definitely. For Regan Jr., this is kind of one of those races where it's really just for fun. He's pretty much just got to get to the end and be in a respectable position by the time that happens.
Should note there was near contact, as there is damage for Regan Jr. Meanwhile, things have calmed down for a while. They were just active, though, for Knight. This is why.
You see Knight in the middle of that Zemke, the blue car with a big run coming down towards the bus stop. Zemke to the inside. Knight going to try and hold on the outside here. As we see a car in the grass, Knight elects to just skip the bus stop entirely.
Takes the slowdown, and that was Zemke who made the mistake, I believe, in the bus stop as well. So Zemke didn't gain the spot from that. Live action just made the pass. As a result, here's that mistake from Zemke that cost him a lot of time. It was because, in part, there was a car in the bus stop.
Yeah, and I think that really rattles you. If you see that, you see the 24 there trying to reverse cut out of the way. Jose Medina said he was feeling funky coming into the night, but I don't think this is what he had in mind.
Yeah, he was running 2-minute 8-second lap times with no front nose and sheared the front nose off about on lap 3. He's finally parked it. Your race leader, Bradley Holly, meanwhile, is approaching the start of lap 10 this upcoming time by 6.4 seconds is now the cushion, running 1:58. The Arrow drivers ran in the 2:01s last time by with the traffic and along with some of the curbing as well. Your thoughts on how Holly has played this final race of the campaign?
I think he's done a super job right now. I mean, he's got the advantage he needs. He's completely out of range of an undercut, and he's got nobody to fight with. It's actually right now for P2. We've got Acosta's got a run coming through the banking in 3 and 4. He's to the inside of Regan Jr. as they approach that new chicane.
Here it comes. Acosta takes away second spot. And Regan Jr. now trying to send it a little bit deeper. Locked it up a touch. This allowed Daniels back within the fight. Regan Jr. though, now losing some pace on this longer run. Keep in mind, Regan Jr. does have some left front damage right above the tire well. That was from the curbing about a lap or two ago. Suffered when Acosta nearly gave him the bump and run in the final chicane.
Yeah, and that previous lap really cost both of these drivers, actually, because they were about 2.5 seconds behind Bradley Holly. And in that single lap, that gap doubled. So having this fight has not really helped them out.
Scotty Johnson, an error issued. This is for the 07 now. On the SGE Esports machines. He was in front of his teammate before. Final chicane changed that.
Oh, he really got over those yellow curves, and that's definitely not what you want to do. He's probably going to have some underbody damage and maybe even some engine damage from doing that. It looked like he just kind of locked the rears up as he got to the entry part of the chicane. Tried to actually make the chicane, and this is an interesting decision to make as to whether you try and actually complete the chicane in that scenario, or whether you just accept that it's not going to happen and you go around the curb and take the slowdown. To be honest, I would have gone around the curb because that's going to hurt. You can see his right front is already kind of bent up. The right rear's got some damage too. Not sure whether that was from the curb, but we've definitely seen drivers pick up damage by crossing over him as severely as that.
Yeah, and as a result, again, an 11th spot. Bit of a bobble also hurting him a little bit. Zemke, mind you, is still right behind him as well. This grouping is from about 9th to 12th position on the racetrack. Still things settling on as things are looking to get a little bit spicy here in some of these packs at this point here. And keep in mind here, Christian, lead pack is starting to get towards that window you talked about as we look at Adams and Kalen. This is right behind Mike Knight as well by a couple tenths.
Yeah, and as we're on lap 10 right now, starting lap 11 for most of the drivers in the field. They're going to be looking at when they're going to come down. Obviously, some opportunities to undercut, or maybe even actually have a little bit of an overcut strategy, drop back a little bit, but just catch them back up with so much more overspeed and get the passes done more easily. And I think that's a thing that we've got to watch out for drivers in this kind of fight that's happening around the back end of the top 10, because that's where the biggest opportunities are going to come out. And I believe that's Knight coming down.
Yes, indeed. He's rolling the dice. So the 68, the first driver coming in for non-damage repair in this race. Wilson Jr. is still in the pit lane. Chad Brown did not start. Medina still repairing his race car. He's the only driver that appears inside the top 20 who has taken this undercut strategy.
Yeah, so what he's going to gain here is this first lap or so. He's going to gain about 4 seconds on the cars that he was kind of fighting right there. So he's definitely going to be ahead of them when those drivers pit. Even if they pit this next lap, he'll jump them because the difference in tires is that severe. The question is, how long do those drivers stay out? Because it becomes 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second pretty quickly. But obviously then they will gain it back out on track. And it all comes down to whether they can catch him back up before everybody equalizes out at around about that lap kind of 7 sort of point in the run.
By the way, your biggest mover is that orange 62, by the way, Mark Halen. Plus 12 now with that move on the inside of Blaine Adams. And again, we've talked about it a couple times. Kalen having his best season in PRL, arguably so far. With several chances to get top 10, some good qualifying pace. And he's been one of the quicker cars on this track. Based on the average pace right now, there's a chance he might get as high as P9, depending on how things cycle out. By the way, pit stops for the AthleteBooker.com esports cars too, Christian, pardon me.
That's a little bit early for those guys, although I suppose it is around about that halfway point, so they're just kind of running that normal, regular strategy. I did think that in this lead group, we might see a couple of drivers try and just go one lap longer than their competition, because yes, it will drop them behind them, but it would give them quite a significant pace advantage towards the end of that last run, so to speak. We see a couple of other drivers come down. Scotty Johnson looks like he's coming down as well.
Yep, that's they are in the pit lane as Regan Jr.'s off and away. O'Brien with a longer stop, though, by about a second or so. I'll lose him a little more touch to his teammates. Also coming out of the lane, Danny Cervantes. Charles Sumner also ducked in along with Adam Young that time by amongst the top 20 cars. Here's the downside for Regan Jr. He's come out right in the middle of traffic.
Yeah, and this is not what you want, because as I was saying, obviously the tire advantage is so massive in those first couple of laps. You need to be able to maximize it, so you don't want to be passing cars, because passing cars is going to slow you down. You're going to lose some of that new tire advantage. And actually, as another note, whilst we're talking about pit stops and pit cycles and so on, the pit exit at this racetrack is not trivial. We've seen drivers make mistakes with it in GT cars, with just sliding into that outer wall, and I think there's a high chance that we'll see people make mistakes with the stock cars as well.
Agree with you on that one. See how Regan Jr. does in this run. Halfway this time by for Bradley Holly and the rest of the field. We'll see if Holly elects to try and split the race in half, or if he tries to stretch it compared to, say, Regan Jr. In fact, the leader is coming in this time by. Other groupings such as this still could be important to think about here as Regan Jr. getting held up at the bus stop.
And Acosta electing to stay out for another lap. Daniels coming down. And Regan Jr. obviously getting hung up there behind Biso Jr. through the bus stop. So it's going to be interesting now to see where both Daniels and Holly come out relative to Regan Jr. because Daniels was obviously behind Regan Jr. before he made his stop.
There's the pit stop comparison you see as well was the pit lane. Regan Jr. has the advantage of being up to speed, has a lap on the tires, a chance to make the undercut here, but remember that fall off is massive. Holly's off and away. Might come out in traffic. Regan Jr. right now is still scored behind him. In fact, he's still a couple seconds behind him. About nearly 2, 3, 4 seconds just about for the number 46 behind the 184 of Bradley Holly.
Yeah, and that right there was really some really smart play by Holly to go pretty much one lap longer than everybody except for Acosta. Acosta's still out there. As we see, James O'Brien's just actually been hit by Danny Cervantes going down into that first horseshoe. Cervantes just keeps it out of the wall.
Yep, let's take a look at that one, and as a result, one driver had a good save, the other said bye-bye as they went to the tires.
And actually, there was no contact. It looked like just Cervantes just ran into the corner really deep, and O'Brien saw him coming, tried to let off the brake, and just rotate away from Cervantes before he got there. So, just a simple lap break by Cervantes.
Either way, he loses time as O'Brien has gained some spots, and Cervantes is now in P7 currently. The drivers who have yet to pit in front of him, Adams and Acosta. Acosta, meanwhile, is currently making his way towards the final sector of the racetrack in the final chicane. Again, the longest you can stretch in the fuel, about 22 laps was the estimate. Some other drivers said for Tuesday up to 19 to 20 laps. Acosta not making that major risk. With 12 to go, he comes into the pit lane for the race lead.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to see where he comes out relative to Regan Jr. He was out there for 2 laps longer than Regan Jr., so by rights, he should come out anywhere from between about 6 to 8 seconds behind Regan Jr.
See if that is indeed the case, as there's Holly on the racetrack. Acosta is still having to get up on the checks for the left side of the tires, and not even close. Holly off and away, Regan Jr. in second. Acosta just getting going from the pit boxes now, as Regan Jr. ran a 1:54.759. Holly also around that ballpark with his outlap. Acosta still cycles, though, 2 seconds in front of P4.
Yeah, and he's come out in a great spot here. Obviously, no traffic for Acosta at all, so he can really maximize his new tires. I think we're going to see him get up to the back of Regan Jr. very, very quickly here. Don't think he's going to have anything for Holly. I think Holly's really got this sewn up at this point. He's got such an advantage. He's got 1 lap better tires than Holly did. I just don't see how anybody's going to be able to challenge him.
Yeah, especially since Holly has a 5.5 second lead over P2 and your championship leader, Richard Regan Jr. By the way, things are heating up around the current battle for P9 after pit stops. The last of the drivers inside the top 20 have come down outside of Derek Schilling. James Duke also yet to pit, as well as Christopher Williams. You have to give Knight credit. He's been trying to hold on for a while, but remember, he is on that undercut strategy by at least 2-3 laps compared to his competitors.
Yeah, exactly, and this is where he's going to be really, really vulnerable. If he can hold these drivers off for, say, another 3-4 laps, which, to be honest, I really do not think is likely. He's got them all stacking up behind him right now. But if he can do that, then the tires will equalize out, and he might be able to hold on to this position. But, a little bit of a mistake coming onto the banking. This is going to give Biso Jr. a huge run to the bus stop. Knight's going around.
Turn 6 today.
Yeah, and this all kind of actually started earlier on in the corner where he missed the apex of the initial, and in doing so actually doubles down on the mistake.
And buzzes the tires too with lockup. At the very least, he didn't loop it into the pavement in turn 1. It's that.
Yeah, it was a good save.
Looking at Kalen, meanwhile, able to get the pass on Scotty Johnson through NASCAR 3 and 4. So this is now a 4-car train for a fight for a top 10 position. 9th is Bisson Jr., Zemke in 10th. 11th is now Kalen. Johnson is 12th, as Kalen looks for one more top 10 to end off the summer months. Kalen not able to get to the inside quite yet towards turn 1 as they go back to the infield.
Yeah, Kalen's got a long time to get this done here. Obviously, he's definitely going to be lucky to get to that top 10, but he's got just over 10 laps to get this move done. So he doesn't need to be overly aggressive here. He can afford to wait a little bit, see if he can force Zemke into making a small mistake, and then just snatch the position away.
A separation there, and a position change coming up the road, by the way. O'Brien letting his teammate Joshua Daniels on go. NASCAR 1 and 2, O'Brien was reeled in by Daniels by a couple seconds. At this point, though, O'Brien has one thing he's got going for him. Unless he makes a major mistake, he's got a 7-second cushion to finish inside the top 5 to end off the season. Yeah, and that definitely looks like that's O'Brien's plan. And actually, the driver who did make a mistake, Josh Slade, was running in the 8th spot, and he was parked 90 degrees to the track at the second horseshoe, so he's just dropped outside of the top 10. It looks like he might have made a mistake in the kink, as we saw some other drivers do earlier in the race. Let's take a look. Josh Slade, you see him stop. No space to get going. You can see right here, this is the exit coming up to the dog leg. I think it was actually the entrance to the west horseshoe, in fact, that did him in. Yeah, he got through the kink okay, and then just trying to get the car slowed down. Looks like he braked a little bit too late, was too wide, and the car just hooked around under braking, and obviously then had to wait a very, very long time to get back going. Fell outside of the top 10, and he's going to be frustrated with himself for that. Yeah, now he's about 5 seconds behind the battle to get back inside the top 10 that we were mentioning a bit before. Lap traffic down low, that's Christopher Williams without a front nose, and who skipped the final chicane, in fact, to let everybody go, in fact. Bisson Jr. still under pressure, though. These drivers very close in terms of times. It's now a 3-car battle for P8 on the racetrack. Yeah, and I don't think this is over at all. Obviously, we see Zemke's very close to the back of Bisson Jr., and I think it'll only take a slight mistake to switch around all 3 positions here. Absolutely at this point. Bisson Jr. a little bit quicker in the middle portion of the infield. He did lose a few tenths last time by, and nearly drifts it, in fact, to the west dog leg. Blows the bottom of the corner. That may allow Zemke and Kalen again to reel them back in towards the entry of turn 6. Yeah, that was wild right there. He was in a complete 4-wheel drift all the way through that second horseshoe, but somehow he didn't lose any time. I'm going to have to take some notes from that, because I haven't seen anybody do that yet this week. Yeah, just a little bit of a drift. And surprisingly, actually got a better exit than anyone else out of turn 6. NASCAR turn 2 already just about broken the draft, heading towards the bus stop.
And he's really moving on right now, trying to get away from this group.
I mean, when it comes to road course racing, do you blame him? Less pressure behind, the more you can focus on your corners and the track itself.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that is a big factor in road course racing, actually, where if you do have that gap behind you, and really it kind of goes in a couple of places as well. If you're attacking a driver ahead of you and you have a big gap behind you, obviously you can afford to move around the track, make some different approaches. If we see hammers that curb, now he's going to really suffer from that. That's definitely going to hurt the underside of the car.
And another mistake from the battle for 8th, 9th, 10th on back. Kalen now looking to move up to P9. Bisson Jr. gives him the space. The 62 now up plus 16 on the race. Nearly missed the corner in turn 1 though. Just about drifted in. Bisson Jr. lets him save it.
A huge slide out of turn 1 there. Bisson Jr. just collecting himself after going over that curb. I don't actually see any visual damage to the car, but obviously that was a pretty heavy hit.
Battle for second about to heat up though. Acosta catch up to the back of Regan Jr. by 3 seconds last time by. Acosta, that was only 7/10 off his fastest lap of the race, and we're coming to 8 laps to go, mind you.
Yeah, I think Acosta with the 2-lap pressure tires, he's got a big advantage, but he's got to press it early on. As soon as he gets an opportunity to get by, he needs to take it, because the longer Regan Jr. can hold him behind, the easier it's actually going to get for him. It sounds counterintuitive, obviously, to hold him off for the entire rest of the race, but the longer he can keep him there, the more the tires will equalize, and the more it'll kind of, well, the harder it's going to be for Acosta. But Regan Jr. looks, that's pretty tight angle for that chicane right there. Does get it stopped. Acosta's going to have a good run though. He's going to definitely go to the inside here for turn 1.
And yes, indeed he does. Here comes the yellow line. Keep in mind, the road course races, NASCAR clarified that double yellow line is not in effect on the oval portion, as Acosta able to get up to second, going to the infield portion of the track. As they say hello to Derek Schilling, the 24th place car in traffic. Schilling moves up to the top. That's going to potentially help Regan Jr. a little bit. We'll have to see if the 46 can keep up here in this lap.
I think we'll see Acosta with much more drive off there. You see him gap Regan Jr. about 3 to 4 car lengths immediately off the first horseshoe. I don't think he's got the time or the tires to try and run down Bradley Holly. We actually got a car off in the second horseshoe in front of him. She's taking a tow straight back to the pit lane right there. I'm not sure who that was.
James Duke.
Okay, he had an interesting moment where he just slid straight to the tires right there.
Not a factor, as James Duke's been having a rough one, should note, for tonight. One of the drivers, a part of the non-broadcasted league before the merger of 2 said leagues a few weeks ago. But Acosta is still 8 seconds back of Bradley Holly, coming to 7 laps to go. The thing
it's
is,
a big
though,
ask.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely, Christian. Is it even doable?
I personally don't think it is. I think had he not been already 6 seconds behind on that last run, had they been able to keep that gap to about the 2.5 to 3 seconds that it was at one point, then this strategy might have worked. But I just think that unless there's an error from Holly that's going to cost him a couple of seconds on one lap, I just don't see him being able to close down this 8-second gap with under 8 laps to go.
Yeah, as close as little as a gap should know, but yeah, it could be and might be out of range at this point. Regan Jr. nearly scraped the wall behind him. You see as well in the backdrop. 7 to go. This time by P9. It's not over yet, folks. Kalen now having to deal with Bisson Jr. right behind. And this pressure also is starting to get towards Adam Zemke, who is trying to hold on to the yellow line through NASCAR 3 and 4.
Yeah, Zemke's actually been given a little bit of a gap right here. It's Kalen. Looks like he's more under threat from Bisson Jr. than he is to threatening Zemke right here. But Bisson Jr. was very, very good through the bus stop. I don't know whether he might have been too good and picked up a slowdown, because he's now crawling through that last chicane.
Now Bisson Jr. really slow off that final corner. Lost a lot of time, and just like that, he's out of range for the position battle. There is one other battle currently heating up a little bit. 11th and 12th. That's where Josh Slade, remember, had that mistake and cycle behind Scotty Johnson. He's now caught up to Scotty Johnson. They also have one of the other drivers who tried the overcut strategy, closing in, and Brett Adams as well.
I think Brett Adams kind of needs these drivers ahead of him to have a little bit of a fight, pull him back into contention. You see Johnson and Slade both go wide there through the first horseshoe. Johnson looks like he's got no rear tires left. They look like they're just completely made of plastic at this point.
Plastic tires are not a good thing, unless maybe they are a Hot Wheels car. Let's put it that way. You put them on a real world car. Good luck. Both of them, again, blow the other horseshoe just about on the west portion as Slade four-wheel drifts it.
And then Adams behind's got to be loving this because both corners here, he's just had the opportunity to gain so much time for both these drivers going wide through the infield. And this is where the infield has really been the defining factor, actually, of this circuit. Obviously, we've got that last chicane, and that does catch people out, but really, a lot of the passing that we tend to see has been going on in the infield. All the mistakes are pretty much in the infield. We do see a couple on the exit of the bus stop, but it's very, very challenging with these cars. You just don't have the downforce that you do in, say, a GT3 car, which makes the infield, to be honest, kind of trivial. In these, it's a real challenge with those flat, tight corners.
And Scotty Johnson nearly loops it down to the bus stop. Now Josh Slade up a spot, and there's what you just mentioned. Mistakes on the exit of the bus stop. And now Johnson lets Slade on by for P11. Brett Adams, in comparison, by the way, was able to nearly floor it through the bus stop.
Yeah, Adams definitely looks like he's got the better tires right now. Whether he can catch both of these drivers and pass them with the remaining time, we'll just have to wait and see.
Rowdy Holly is also caught up, by the way, to James Duke, who is back on the racetrack a couple laps down. One to be precise, trying to put him 2 down. But Holly is still not the fastest car on the track. Acosta by just a 10th. He's done a solid job tonight to pull away early as soon as everyone started fighting for second and just take off like a rocket ship.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you want to have happen to you at a road course. You want to start on the pole. You want to just be able to go and immediately build a gap, and then really just not have to worry about anybody all race. I mean, nobody's been close to him. The closest they were was really at the very beginning of the race on the initial start.
Just like that, James Duke nearly goes to a full stop to left by the race leader. But here's the thing, too, about how this race has played out for Holly. With where he's finishing right now, will very likely be moving up to P2 in the final championship standings once everything's all said and done, as there's 5 laps to go this time.
Scotty Johnson with a huge mistake coming onto the banky right there. He's just got no rear grip at all. Lets Adams go. He looked like he just grabbed the grass on turning for the left-hander and kind of had to drift all the way through to the exit. So he lost a lot of time right there to Josh Slade.
Very terrifying moment for Johnson indeed. They're now a full minute behind the race leader. But just look right up in front a little bit. You see how Johnson struggling on the exit of the bus stop right now with those rear tires. Adams, meanwhile, he's just able to stick it much more again with those fresher tires, just that bit of advantage. It's just been able to help him a lot of that section of the racetrack. In fact, it's been his best section all day, it seems.
Yeah, and he's been having a really solid run. It's just a question as to whether the tires are going to get back with a shot at that top 10. I think he might have left it a little bit too late. With 5 to go, it's going to be he's got a lot of track that he's got to cover to get back up to that fight.
About 5 seconds is that gap, to be precise. Give or take, Josh Slade is also missing the corners up in front. Get as high as P11. Plus, there's mistakes in the racetrack. By the way, David Wilson Jr. officially out of the race in 28th position. Meanwhile, Kalen, pressure continues as Bishaw Jr. nearly goes off, and another car was just about off in that same section, believe there.
Bishaw Jr. not giving up on this. Obviously, saw that mistake that lost him these spots, but Zemke not able to get away from Kalen, and Kalen not able to get away from Bishaw Jr.
And I talked about this with a couple drivers after that race on Tuesday. They mentioned it's very difficult to break away at this track, especially with the draft and the speedway portion. And of course, the difficulty to pass in some cases, as they've now lost time again to Zemke because both of them danced off at turn 6 once more.
Yeah, and it's interesting to bring up the draft effect, because you would think that you would get such a strong run, especially down the backstretch towards the bus stop. But it seems like that you just don't. You don't actually pull up very much on the car ahead of you at all. But at the same time, the car ahead can't get away from you. So it's so strange. You do pull cars along with you, but what you don't seem to do is give them a massive tow that allows them an easy pass.
Exactly. So as a driver, how do you try and break up that ebb and flow, and knowing that you don't have the strategy card to pull now? You have to hope for mistakes. What if you don't get that mistake? Bisot Jr. just made one, by the way, to lose touch again to Kalen.
Yeah, Bisot Jr. there, a little bit slow through that last chicane, obviously opened that gap up a lot. And really, that's all you can do. All you can do is just not make mistakes, hit your marks as you have done the previous times in the race. And you've got to not get drawn into trying to make the pass, because if that's when you start deviating from the things you know. That's when you start trying to do different things, which is okay if there's a genuine opportunity for the pass, if you're right up behind them and so on. But if you're in a position like Bisot Jr. is right now, where he's, say, 3, 4, 5 car lengths back, he's not in a position to make an immediate pass, so there's no reason to be really dancing around the track. He pulls up doing his normal line, and he just needs to stick to that until he gets into that range to actually then make a pass. As the car ahead, there's nothing you can do other than just don't make mistakes. You don't want to give them an easy pass by, say, running wide at a corner and just giving up the position totally. But you can't really, if you're just slower, there's nothing really you can do. You just gotta hope that, like right now, Bisot Jr., another mistake coming onto the banking right there, that this just keeps happening and it keeps allowing you to stay ahead and maybe just have a little bit more breathing room every time the driver behind you makes mistakes.
See him losing a ton of time after the bobble. By the way, Richard Regan Jr. just had a massive moment, because Steven Durbin nearly ran to the back end of him in the final chicane, coming to 3 laps to go. Since then, Durbin is able to get back going, but he nearly got popped hard from behind. He's already thanked that said driver for not running him over, and keep an eye on that 81 coming up behind him and quick.
46 coming through the chicane here, no real problems, but whoa! 81 completely misses the entry right there. Manages to cut it left.
Regan Jr.'s lucky that he didn't hit the back end of him. That could have cost him a title.
Yeah, that could have been very similar to what we saw with, say, Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex Jr. at the Charlotte Roval, where the car behind just is out of control and tags the one ahead into a big spin.
So sigh of relief for Regan Jr. fans. Still holding on to third. He was getting reeled in by Danielson and Bryan before they reached traffic. He's now since gained 2 seconds on said gap, but Hawley coming towards 2 to go this time by, with a gap still holding on of about 5 seconds. Pat Harvey, though, he is seen on the side of the track, has crashed from 18th. He had that spin in the last time, in the first in the bus stop. This time he got stuck in the tire barrier to demolish his race car.
Yeah, looks like he's had a pretty big off there. I suspect what's gone wrong is that he's had a mistake happen through the first part of the bus stop. It's thrown him offline, and he's ended up hooking left into those tires.
So Pat Harvey, not the way he wanted this race to play out, but what a way for Hawley to end this season off. He started showing that championship form he showed in the past again this season. Came away with victory. Also had 6 top 5s and 7 top 10s. What a drive tonight to just about lock in his second, become the 3rd multi-time winner of the season, the others being your other winners in O'Brien and Regan Jr.
Yeah, and Hawley's had a really strong season, and the thing is that if it wasn't for Regan Jr. just being so ridiculously dominant, to be honest, when it comes to the regular oval tracks that we're used to visiting, then it's pretty much without question that Hawley would have had a very strong run at taking the title again in this series.
Look on the bright side too for Hawley. Yes, the gap's been going down. Yes, he's been able to back it on down, but just about every other car around him has had almost a brain explosion. Duke ended up getting hit by Williams in the past lap. You also had several other cars having to dodge air machines, and that's why battles such as P9 are again bundled up, because they had to dodge so many other cars. K1 and Bisson Jr. again are hooked back up, coming towards the infield for the second time. Second to last time, rather.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot here, and Bisson Jr. keeps trying to get on the outside of Kalen down towards his kink, but he's just got no rear traction at all. He nearly spins the car pretty much every single time off that corner and loses again 3 to 4 car lengths. And he just needs to be a little bit softer on the gas. As Kalen's actually made a mistake, this is going to give Bisson an opportunity. He's got the run. He's going to be clear as they get down to the left-hander, but I don't think Kalen's going to want to give this up that easily.
Can he get enough stabilization for the corner? No, he's still slipping and sliding. Lots of heat in the rear tires still, and now is losing touch to Bisson Jr. again. Can Bisson Jr. try and hold on for a lap and a half without a mistake? Remember the last time he held on this spot with a decent cushion, he made a mistake coming towards the start and finish line.
And I'm actually really impressed with how Bisson Jr. has recovered from that mistake he made through that new chicane where he really hammered over those curbs. He's done a really strong recovery. As Kalen's actually made a mistake and gone really wide through the first part of the bus stop. That's going to lose him any opportunity to get that spot back.
Keep in mind the white flag is out. Final lap for these drivers, this time by Bradley Hawley, still having about 10 corners to go before he wins his second race of 2020 Season 3, his best season of the year. After having a slow point, battle for the championship early on in the winter time with Richard Regan Jr., had a slow Season 2 and had a resurgence here in the summertime.
He's done a great job tonight. It's just been completely dominant all night. It had the pit strategy totally covered off. Elected to go a little bit longer. Was proven right in that, to be honest. He came out still in the lead. The fresher tires has just been able to stretch away.
Only one more lap car up in front of him. Doyle Lawrence is just up the track. His return back since the early stages of the season. Other than that, the track is clear. Just a few more corners left for the 184 for Wetterback Racing Joey Rules.
Gotta get through that last chicane one more time. No threat from behind.
Costa closed the gap to as little as 3 seconds, but it ends up being too big in the end. Bradley Hawley, final set of corners. Checkered flag waves for the second time. In 2020 Season 3 of the Purell Cup Series, Bradley Hawley takes the checkered. He wins at the Daytona Road Course. Acosta comes home in second, but the man who takes the championship for a third consecutive time for AthleteBooker.com Esports, it's Richard Regan Jr. He's a 3-time champion of the Purell Cup Series. And what a championship for that Ford Mustang this season. And what a campaign for that entire organization. Doing what they've done all season, Christian. Finishing with all their drivers in the top 5 again at the checkered.
Yeah, and you could actually see this to good effect in this race. They all clearly had a plan regarding pit strategy. They all executed it at exactly the same time, made no mistakes. Well-deserved team champions, and obviously Richard Regan Jr. just been incredibly dominant this season. It speaks volumes really when you can say that third place is probably a little bit disappointing for him in context of the amount of wins he's picked up this season.
Absolutely impressive drives for these two. Likely your 1-2 once everything's all sorted out for the championship standings. The last of the drivers also crossed the stripe. In total, 19 cars at the checker flag finish on the lead lap in what was an exciting end to the Purell Cup Series season. And what a way to end it, with the difficult racetrack, a track that drivers have only had a couple weeks of preparation on, mind you, with the new chicane, about a week or so of preparation with, and with the taller chicane, about only a couple days before entering tonight. In the end, that 184 just conquered them all.
Yeah, an absolute curveball for a finale, really. Obviously a track that nobody had any experience of in a stock car.
Look at the bright side. He didn't go to the circle track. As Bradley Holly, I believe he's ready to do some circles himself. See if Richard Regan Jr. joins him for the celebration here at the World Center of Racing to end off 2020 Season 3 of Purell Cup Series action. What a race. What a championship. Congratulations once again to Bradley Holly and Richard Regan Jr. as we get ready for post-race coverage. Celebration time for both Holly and Regan Jr. Holly, your race winner. Regan Jr., your 3-time champion. Post-race coverage coming up in just a moment. You're watching the Global Sim Racing Channel, live from the virtual Daytona International Speedway in Daytona Beach, Florida. Welcome back, everyone, to Daytona International Speedway for post-race coverage of the Precision Racing League Cup Series, sponsored by Webb Hearing Centers, Road Trip Transport, Butt Kicker, and as well for the final round of the season by Neonism. What a race to end off the campaign for the summertime. In the end, Bradley Holly comes away with his second victory of the season to close things out at the Daytona International Speedway road course, making history. He's the first winner on the circuit in series history as well. Acosta came home in second, closed the gap of the checker flag to 2.4 seconds. He was the quickest car on the track in the final 3 to 6 laps of this event. Regan Jr. does enough to clinch a 3-time three-peat championship in the Purell Cup Series to continue the potential momentum for the playoff format in 2020 Season 4. We'll talk about that in post-race coverage here. Daniels, O'Brien, Cervantes, Paul Johnson, Adam Zemke, Robert Bisson Jr., and Mark Kalin round out the top 10 in what was an intense one. Separated by 58 seconds, that top 10.
And just missing out on the top 10, we have Brett Adams. He came home in 11th after having that wild battle, really, for most of the race, for that fight for the back end of the top 10. Scotty Johnson, another driver we saw sliding around on those tires for a lot of the race, comes home in 12th. Josh Slater, that mistake down at the second horseshoe, unfortunately drops him outside of the top 10, comes home in 13th. Blaine Adams started 14th and came home in 14th. And Mike Knight, the driver who started off the night inside the top 10, had a couple of issues, unfortunately comes home in 15th. Charles Sumner, didn't really talk about him much all night at all, started 22nd, came home 16th. Adam Young comes home in 17th. Colton Lane, another driver who normally features quite a lot in our broadcast, didn't see a lot about him tonight, comes home in 18th. And Doyle Lawrence, the last driver on the lead lap, in 19th. With Pat Harvey, we saw him bury it into the tire walls in the bus stop, comes home in 20th.
Also a lap down, Brandon Adams. He crashed in the final 2 laps and caused a lot of the chaos about third, fourth on back. Turbin finished 1 lap down after nearly hitting the rear end of Regan Jr. Smith 1 lap down, Schilling 1 lap down, with James Duke, along with Christopher Williams, 2 laps down apiece. Duke and Williams had an incident, by the way, in the second to last lap as well. Jose Medina and David Wilson DNF out of this race. Chad Brown did not start the final race of the season. An intense one, to say the very least, here at the Daytona International Speedway's road course. The World Center of Racing had it all tonight, and Bradley Holly had the pace tonight. Bradley, your second victory of the season to close things out in 2020 Season 3. How does it feel to be a winner once again in this series?
It feels great. It feels good to close out the season with one more victory.
Let's talk about the pace you had tonight. You ran away right from the get-go. It seemed 2 seconds was the gap on the first lap. What was the challenges you had in that cockpit trying to keep that gap and grow the gap in turn?
Trying to keep from locking up the front tires and trying to keep from spinning the rears. Once we took the green flag and I saw James was under Abner, I knew I had to push as hard as I could to open up the gap to give myself a little bit of a cushion and just go from there.
Now, this, in the end, unofficially puts you around P2 with the drop weeks factored in the championship season, right behind Regan Jr. How would you describe this 2020 Season 3 campaign for you?
It's tough. Just tough. Richard's a good driver. Always a tough competitor week in and week out. So I gotta step up my my game for next season.
How do you plan to do that?
Practice. Try to figure out some other things and maybe find some other kind of advantage.
Who do you want to thank for this victory tonight in the 184?
I'd like to thank you guys for broadcasting us week in, week out. The Waterback guys for practicing, trying to figure out what we need to do to have the competitive pace. And North Star Title for sponsoring me this season.
Congratulations on the victory tonight by more than 2 seconds, Bradley.
Thank you very much.
Bradley Holly coming away with his second race victory of the season. Abner Acosta finished in P2, one of his highest finishes of the campaign. Closed the gap from as far back as about 7-8 seconds after things got single file. Got it under 3 seconds, Christian.
Yeah, Abner, another strong run, and another strong run on a road course as well. Obviously, we saw at Sonoma, you featured quite a lot in that fight at the front of the field, and came home second tonight. Started second. It looked like the beginning of the race there was quite a battle between yourself and Richard Regan Jr. And talk us through that kind of pit strategy that you tried to do with the overcut, which led to you having to obviously repass Richard Regan Jr., but gave you maybe the opportunity to run down Bradley Holly at the end.
Yeah, good evening, guys. Yeah, at the start of the race, I got passed by Richard and can't remember who else it was, but I lost the 2 spots and I guess I couldn't get it together at the beginning. But then at the end, I ended up passing them. It cost me a little bit of time from Bradley. The pit strategy was pretty much I didn't know they were gonna pit. As soon as I saw him pit, I was like, "Oops!" and I just decided to pit on the next lap. And yeah, that did help me at the end. I was catching him, but if I think I would only get to him if he would just make mistakes. He was pretty fast.
Yeah, that was actually something that we mentioned as well. We thought that the gap was maybe just a little bit too big for you to run down in the number of laps that you had there to go. But still, you must be pretty happy with that second place finish. And obviously, you've had a lot of strong runs this season. And we talk about next season. And have you got plans to return to this league?
Yeah. This is my first season running Oval. I really liked it a lot. So I think next season I want to put more time into it, practice-wise and everything. And I think I'll do better. I think in all the tracks here, all the races, think I had a realistic chance of winning them. So pretty happy with that.
Yeah, well, we've definitely enjoyed having you in the league. And as you say, you've had you've had some really strong runs, and obviously had a couple of chances to take a win, and that's been great to see, especially from somebody new to the league for this season. Now, obviously, you've had some support going through the season. And before we let you go, is there anybody that you'd like to give a shout out?
Yeah, I want to thank my team, Lever Motorsports, obviously PRL for the league, and you guys at GSRC for broadcasting all the time. Thank you.
Thank you for coming and chatting with us, and once again, congratulations on the second place finish today.
Thank you.
Again, Abner Acosta, P2 tonight. But the man who came home in P3 is now a 3-time champion. Three-peat for Richard Regan Jr. He now joins us to celebrate. How does it feel to be a 3-time champion in a row in the PRL Cup Series?
Yeah, it feels good. There's a lot of good competition in here, so it's good to keep this momentum, and hopefully we can keep it for next season to win the overall championship.
How would you describe this season's campaign to try and get the most points you can, as well as the fact you led the season in victories with 6?
Yeah, the season was pretty good for me. I don't think I drove as good as I did last season. This tire change really messed me up. I just haven't really been able to figure it out. So, I got to just keep practicing, keep getting that pace. But yeah, I can't complain. I got 6 wins, so and still came out with the championship. So definitely good.
Now, 2-part question. Do you plan to come back for season 4? And how do you feel about the playoff bracket, so to speak, that will now be utilized, that was introduced all the way back in 2019 in the winter time, back in season 1, for this upcoming campaign?
Oh, I definitely plan to come back for season 4. In regards to the playoff bracket, I'm not a big fan of that, just because there's so many variables that you can't control. Like, for example, for tonight, me and that lap car, I got into trouble with some trouble, and it really killed the front end of the car, and that was basically my race done. So it's just anything like that can happen. In the championship 4 race, I'm basically almost can point my way into the championship 4 based off of playoff points. I just have to make sure I am a little consistent. But it depends. We don't know what track we're gonna be at yet, because we follow the iRacing schedule, and that doesn't always line up with the real life schedule. So hopefully it's a decent track, and hopefully we can come away with the championship.
Overall, though, a lot of work for your organization, a team championship, a dominant organizational performance. Just about every single race, all your teams' cars made the top 3, and on top of that, announcing today, just a couple days ago, mind you, that they are also proud to introduce something called Team Hype, with the inclusion of AthleteBooker.com Esports as the title sponsor for the upcoming campaign. Your thoughts on that for that season as well, to try and make it a back-to-back for your organization in this series?
Yeah, it's definitely awesome. We have Team Hype coming on with Athlete Booker. It's still going to be me, James, and Joshua Daniels as the drivers, and we're going to hope to bring home another team championship. We're going to see how far we can go, and try to get the overall championship from the driver's standpoint as well. So yeah, definitely exciting times ahead.
Overall, who would you like to thank for your 3rd straight championship in this series?
Yeah, first and foremost, I gotta thank everyone at Bobby Dale and Hart Legacy Esports for putting in the time. Especially Boyd Hogan putting in the time with me almost every week, helping me become a better driver. I definitely gotta thank my 2 teammates, Joshua and James. Really good teammates to have. Always competitive, always fast, on pace. So, gotta thank Athlete Booker, of course, for coming on board as a sponsor. Me and James and Joshua. I gotta thank Butt Kicker, Multiple Sclerosis Society, Susan G. Komen, Abruzzi Racewear, Oculus Glasses, everyone at GSRC. Got to give a shout out to Brad for winning. Really good competitor of mine, and Abner. He's really fast too. So they're gonna be some stiff competition next season. And you guys at GSRC and everyone that watches.
Congratulations on not just the podium tonight, but your third straight championship in this series. Congratulations, Richard.
Thank you, guys.
Richard Regan Jr., a 3-time champion in the PRL Cup Series. Lot to unpack after all this action tonight here, Christian. First things first when it comes to this race tonight. Your thoughts on how everything progressed here at the Daytona Road Course the first time this series raced on this track.
I was really glad to see that we all kind of got through that first lap without any major incidents. Obviously, we had that little that turnaround that happened right on the start, but it didn't look like it affected any more than 2 drivers, so that was good to see. And I think for the most part, everybody handled the track really well. We saw some struggle with that last chicane a little bit, and we saw a couple of offs in the infield, but everybody looked like they adapted to it very, very well. And obviously, we had some really great battles throughout the field. We had that battle for second spot for quite a long time. Obviously, Abner Acosta came out on top of that. Holly just really dominated the race. I think right from the beginning, he kind of had it under control, and it was just a really measured performance by him. And it was great to see some drivers have some really good runs. Obviously, we saw Mark Kalin get all the way from 25th up to 10th, and then we had some other drivers with some really strong runs as well. Biso Jr. from 16th to 9th, and it was good to see those drivers have a good night, because I think this was a track where a lot of practice kind of really showed up, and the drivers that kind of adapted to it the best, probably put the most time into it, really were the ones that benefited from it.
100%, and it was fairly clear who put in the work. But there's going to be a lot of work for when Season 4 gets underway in about a few weeks or so. We talked about this when it first debuted back in November, Christian, during Season 1, if you remember back all the way to 2019. Long time ago now. But that will have a playoff championship that will coincide with the Season 4 campaign. There is a normal championship, mind you, for Season 4, but essentially all the drivers who have won throughout the past 3 seasons have a chance to participate if they were part of the 20 of the 30 scheduled racings during that time frame. All the series champions, who just so happens to be all Richard Regan Jr., as well as the playoff spots being filled by accumulated points throughout that 30-year race period. It's going to get interesting, a lot of that championship discussion over the next couple months, to see who is the best driver overall in 2020 in the overall championship, and who can win the final series championship of said season in Season 4.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to keep track of the 2 kind of separate but sort of interlinked championships. Obviously, as you said, there's going to be a regular championship as there has been for every season so far, but then there's also going to be those playoffs as well. And I think realistically, we're going to see the same drivers who are strong in the regular seasons be strong in the playoffs as well. We heard Richard Regan Jr. there say he wasn't necessarily a great fan of it, just because there is a little bit of element of luck. Obviously, he's had very, very strong runs over the course of the season and over the course of the past couple of seasons, but there has been times where things have gone against him. Obviously, last season there was a lot of times where he'd be leading the race, and then a caution would come out and the field would do a split strategy to him, and he'd end up losing the race and losing a lot of points because of that. And I think that's something that maybe in the regular season didn't really hurt too much, but obviously in a playoff type format, that kind of situation happening again has the potential to knock out a driver such as Regan Jr. relatively early on.
Yeah, this could get interesting in a few weeks or so. There's a lot of time until then. There are a lot of people to thank, though, before we say goodbye. First, we'd like to thank you, the viewers, for tuning in for tonight's exciting action from Daytona. We'd also like to thank the organizers, Charles Sumner, and the rest of the staff of the Precision Racing League for organizing this strong series and what was an eventful Season 3 campaign for them. We'd also like to thank the various sponsors who have taken part in tonight's action as well as throughout the season, including Webb Hearing Center, Road Trip Transport, Butt Kicker, as well as Neonism, and the many other race sponsors who have sponsored various different events throughout 2020 Season 3. We'd also like to thank the drivers for a strong campaign in what was an eventful season with many different comers and goers and many drivers making the next leap up in performance to show what they could do by the time they got to the fall. I'd like to ask, are you interested in advertising with GSRC? Our channel's 1 million global monthly impressions are a great way to get your branding seen by a diverse audience. Follow the link in the description to learn more about the Global Sim Racing channel. This is the perfect time to also thank the companies who provide the software and hardware for our broadcasts on the Global Sim Racing channel now on your screen. Additional thanks go to Jude Lalonde, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of our great work. Thanks to the team throughout this campaign and Christian Deshawn, as well as members such as Ryan Jones and Bill Soupson, who appeared in various different races throughout the campaign, and the many others who have also appeared throughout this season and also called the various different broadcasts for PRL racing action on the Global Sim Racing channel. We'd also like to take the time to remind you, if you'd like to find out more about GSRC, you can find the upcoming races and more at GSRC or GlobalSimRacingChannel.com. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can check out our merchandise for sale at gsrc.stormvy.com or check out our social media on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global Sim Racing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Graham. Don't forget to head over to our YouTube page to hit that big red subscribe button so you don't miss a moment here on the Global Sim Racing Channel. As talked about, the next season based on the iRacing calendar. Still a few weeks out until official announcements. Registration expected to begin in a couple weeks or so for the Precision Racing League Cup Series for Season 4. To find out more information on how to register, go to PrecisionRacingLeague.com. That is PrecisionRacingLeague, one word.com, to find out more about the series. Also like to take the time to remind you there are plenty of other races coming up until then, now on your screen. Be sure to check those out and mark them down your calendar. But for the many different drivers and many different broadcasters who have taken part this season throughout PRL Cup Series action for 2020 Season 3. For Christian Schauder and Sean Ambrose, for Bill Soupson for the pit road reporting in the last round, for Ryan Jones for fill-in work, as well as Adam Lundgren and the rest of the many other announcers who take part in PRL action throughout a season-to-season basis, I'm Justin Prince. Thank you for tuning in for this season's action, but until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.